8 crap things that happen during IB exam week. Hi, my name is Joaquin. I got a perfect 45 in the IB diploma. And for the first crap thing that happens during the IB diploma is that there will be days during the IB where you're going to question yourself. You're going to question what you learned, who you've become, what exams you have, and ultimately whether or not you're going to make it out alive. And I find that this happens a lot with high achieving students because they spend all this time learning. When you spend all that time learning, you reach the end of if you've ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Essentially, you begin to know the stuff that you don't know because you know so much. And because of that, you realize that you're not as smart as you once thought, which makes you question whether or not you actually know stuff to begin with. And this is why some of the top people who've gotten top scores in the IB, myself included, have reached this point right before the exam where we start to doubt everything we thought we knew. And I want you to know that this is completely normal. It's just a natural part of the Dunning-Kruger effect. There were also days where I kept comparing myself to classmates. I thought that I wasn't as smart, I was dumber, I had some type of problem because I saw the way my classmates were working, how long they were working. Some of them were pulling all-nighters every single day. So understand that that's completely normal. And one of the biggest determining factors that comes down in the last few days is the ability to sit down and do focused pieces of work. So something else that happens is that not only do you compare yourself with what grades you're going to get, but you also begin to compare yourself with others because you start to see how long other people are studying, how much more they know in study groups or in group chats and whatnot. It just starts to become this entire monkey house of just who did what, how long is Jeff studying, who pulled the most all-nighters. So what I strongly suggest is that in the last few days leading up to the exam, do not ask your friends how much they're studying. Do not ask your friends to try to make some type of comparison, who knows more, how much time the person was sleeping, none of that, because frankly, it's not useful information, right? You're comparing apples to oranges. You have no idea how much time they actually spent studying. You have no idea how much focus they were in that states of flow. Just because you spent some time studying does not necessarily mean that you did so effectively and in a state of flow. So more importantly, it creates unnecessary stress. Now, understand that the last week or so during the IB diploma, this is the time that I call the gray days. All right. And I think I was pretty lucky because every single day leading up to that, it was very cloudy. It was like actually gray outside. It was gray every single day, just clouds outside. And because of that, like the last week just felt like this mush of time. Like I don't really remember what happened. Nothing much happened. It was just kind of just week that just felt very long. That's basically what it felt like. Which leads me to my second point of crap things that happen during the IB diploma exam week is that you begin to develop this tunnel vision. Essentially what I mean by this is that during the IB exam week, I create these barriers, these mental barriers that I cannot be happy. I don't allow myself to be happy until the exams are over. And basically I just spent the entire last week of the exams just sad out of my mind. I was just borderline depressed because I didn't allow myself to be happy. I said once I was done with the exams, I would then be happy. So including the 2 weeks of examination as well as the 1 week of the gray weeks, it was basically just 3 weeks of just mush, just mashed together of just not the happiest. It was just kind of meh. So instead of enjoying the difficulty of the process, I correlated the end result with my happiness. And because of that, it essentially creates this void of unhappiness because everything that isn't that end result must not be happiness, which means it's basically this state of mush unhappiness leading up to the end of the results. This is why I'm not a very big fan of adding rewards after any form of work, any form of studying, any form of goal achievement, simply because the reward in many ways detracts you away from enjoying the process itself. You should be able to reach a point in really any work that you're doing, whether that's the IB, your extracurriculars, your university acceptance, anything like that, where you enjoy the process simply because it's making progress. All right. The reason why I love sitting down and doing focused work on any discipline in my life is because I enjoy the fact that I'm making progress towards becoming the better version of myself. I am not doing it for some type of reward later down. All right. Not only is that abstract, but it also detracts me away from fully enjoying the process. And when you reach that state where you're able to enjoy the process simply because of the process itself and simply because of the progress you're making, that's when you become really unstoppable because that's where you get quote unquote infinite motivation, if you want to call it. I'm not a big fan of motivation simply because it's an emotion. I think discipline is much stronger. But if you want to talk about motivation, if you want to talk about feeling like you want to get things done, an appreciation of the process is one of the best strategies to do that. So the way you do this is next time you're studying for the exam or next time you're at the gym, this is also why I love going to the gym. It's one of the best ways to practice this. Next time you're doing anything of difficulty, of rigor, of challenge, anything like that. Instead of focusing on finishing the difficulty, finishing the process, finishing the actual work itself and getting the reward, the fact that I'm doing work right now means that I'm making progress towards my better self, which means that the work right now is worth it. And that should be enough to really incentivize you to continue moving forward, to continue doing the difficult work simply because it makes you better. And for me, at least, that removed that tunnel vision I had, because I had it for the first few days and then I just meditated a little bit and I realized what was going on. And instead of trying to wait it out until the end result, and that's when I would be happy, I simply took a step back and I realized that, hey, I can be happy right now. I can allow myself to enjoy my time and just enjoy the progress of becoming a better individual. And the third thing that happens during the exam week that is absolutely crap is that you will lose sleep, right? Most IB students completely sacrifice their sleep, completely sacrifice their mental health, completely sacrifice all the necessary things they need to be a human being, and instead rely solely on Red Bull, rely solely on all these supplements, all these other extra things, and basically just throw sleep completely out the window. However, that should absolutely not be the case, because sleep is more important, just as important, if not more important than eating food, than drinking water. It is a fundamental, vital function of your body, getting proper sleep. This is especially important if you haven't learned anything during the IB diploma. You can maybe cram for one of the exams, but if you have two exams back to back, maybe on one day and on the other, and you cram, it is not a good idea at all, simply because you're not going to make it to the second exam. You're just going to be exhausted. And one of the most important resources you need when you sit down is the ability to reach states of flow, right? When you sit down in the exam, you need to be able to sit down and condense all the 2 years of information and really reach a state of productive flow. So this one's non-negotiable. The same way that you wouldn't eat food before going into the exam, you need to make sure you get a crucial 8.5 hours of sleep going before the exam. One of the things that happened to me before my physics exam is that I got like 5 hours of sleep. And the reason why that happened was because I didn't properly cool down, all right? I was scheduled to get 9 hours, except I went in my bed and I just stayed there, worried about the exam, stressing about what I learned and the rest of it. And I only got like 5 hours of sleep. 9 hours in my bed, 4 hours was just staring at the wall, trying to fall asleep, worried about what would happen. And then finally I fell asleep and only got 5 hours sleep in my first exam. I actually got very lucky with this because I had a weekend until my next exam moving forward. So you might not get that same amount of luck. And because of that, I strongly suggest you have some type of power down routine, right? If you're constantly doing work, if you're constantly in this frenzy of things going on, it's going to be very difficult for you to cool down, power down, and then ultimately sleep. So what I strongly suggest is you meditate for maybe like 5 to 10 minutes. You don't need to do anything Buddha. You don't need to do anything like that. Simply a state of mindfulness is all you need. So what I typically put is simply just some Lord of the Rings music, okay, because that's what I like. I sit down and I just think about the mountains. I think about the forest. I think about just the earth in general, the planet. I try to get myself out of my body and just thinking about nature in general. And that calms me down a lot and allowing me ultimately to fall asleep much faster. And that is something I wish I did before my physics exam instead of going right into trying to sleep, which leads me to point number 4, and that is that you will procrastinate. Look, you already know that procrastinating until the last day is not a good idea, all right? Cramming before the exam, terrible idea. But there's another way that students procrastinate, and that is through multitasking. Rather than sitting down and staying focused on difficult work, we procrastinate by checking your phone at the same time, by trying to do another problem set of another homework and just quickly switching between the two, or trying to check social media or watch TV or something else. We try to procrastinate, or maybe even speak with friends. And understand that multitasking is a form of procrastination, because instead of taking the exam full on, you're simply diverting your limited attention towards a finite number of tasks. So absolutely no multitasking. But if you're watching this video right before the IB exams, whether that's one day before or 1 week before or maybe even 10 minutes before, check out this resource right here. All right, so you want to go into the link down below at grizzlyleague.com/Easter egg. You found yourself an Easter egg and type in the code Grizzlies Recall. All right, that's capital G, capital R, all one word, Grizzlies Recall. You should hopefully see something on the screen right here. Type that into the link in the description down below and get an infographic on how to cram last minute if you're in that situation. But hopefully you're not, but just knowing IB students in general. Like I remember seeing this one guy who was watching this video for his IB literature exam, literally 5 5 minutes before the exam started. And he was like, yeah, man, I didn't study. I gotta like study. 5 minutes before the exam, right? He was on his phone watching a literature video. I mean, it just never, IB students sometimes never cease to amaze me. All right, number 5, that you will need to somehow sacrifice your social life in one way or another. All right, this is similar to sleep and similar to exercise, where people sacrifice short-term gains for long-term results. And there is some validity to that, meaning that if you were to spend as much time as possible studying for the IB exam, there probably is a point where you're gonna get more of it. Now, would I suggest you completely cut away all the time you spend with your friends and family? Absolutely not, all right? In fact, one of the most important things for just high performance in general is the ability to properly rest and recover. And leading up to the exam, you don't need to do anything insane, okay? You don't need to, I used to go skiing every single Sunday. You don't need to go skiing. You don't need to go to concerts. If you want to, you can, but it's not necessary. What I suggest instead is simply you do something every few hours for like 10 to 15 minutes that is actually fun. So maybe every 2 hours you stop and then you go outside and you walk around with your dog, which is exactly what I did. Or you jump on the trampoline. Or I had a girlfriend at the time, and basically a few days before the IB exam and during the IB exam period, we went out a few times, right? So long story short, you want to find a way to do something fun. And that fun thing might actually be spending time with your friends. So ultimately, find proper time, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, maybe it's like an hour chunk at the end of the day, maybe it's a few hours at the end of the week to really cool down, do something fun, refresh your brain. Again, walking with my dog in the forest was what I found the most beneficial. Same thing with jumping on the trampoline, same thing with hanging out with my girlfriend and some of her friends. Long story short, find time to do something fun. Do not forget to do this, because again, we fall into this tunnel vision of I need to get perfect grades, and the marginal improvement you get from like 10 extra minutes or 15 extra minutes every few hours is vastly outweighed by the mental clarity you gain by taking a proper rest and recovery. The number 6 crap thing that happens during the IB exam is that you realize that there's a lot of stuff you don't know, right? There's a lot of little bits and pieces here that you didn't realize at all. I'll give you an example. In one of my economics exam, it was economic paper 1. We were talking about the Keynesian theory of economics, and then someone mentioned automatic stabilizers, and I had no idea what that was, right? They were like, automatic stabilizers, you gotta know this with the economy. Literally no idea what that was an hour before the exam. Now, understand that if stuff like this happens, if you don't know what it is right before the exam, you're probably fine, right? You don't need to try to cram the entire thing. I just spent literally like 10 minutes online reading it up, so I knew kind of what was going on in case I just so happened to get the question. But even if you get the question, especially with paper 1, you still have another option. So understand that's there. What you don't want to do is you don't want to be stressing right before the exam and then going in this fit and then getting this fever and all this type of show that happens to people when they just are stressed out of their mind. What you don't want to do is stress out your mind and then approach the exam from this scarcity type of angle, right? And this was a very big takeaway for me, because a lot of the exams where I did poorly, it was always from this angle of how do I survive, right? I always approached it from this survival framework. Instead of approaching it from a survival framework, I want you to approach it from the framework that I'm going to win, that I'm going to go into that exam and I'm going to crush it. I'm really going to go and destroy it, right? And that comes from having built the confidence of just doing so many past paper questions. This is why I strongly suggest everybody does as many past paper questions as you humanly can. Not only is it the best way with active recall, but it's also the strongest way to truly build that confidence in yourself. That way, when you go into the exam, you know exactly what's happening. You know exactly the type of questions you're going to get. And then when you get them, you can just take them on right away from that angle of I'm going to destroy this rather than I'm trying to survive or I'm trying to simply make it. All right. And then number 7 is that you forget to do the stuff you need to survive. Talk about sleep, we talk about social life. There's a few other things you need to survive, okay? Number 1 is you need to eat enough food. You need to eat healthy food. A lot of people, they end up eating ramen, they end up eating this junk food, they end up just not eating. Like I've seen people who just don't eat. I'm too busy studying to simply get up for 5 minutes and eat some food. Terrible possible idea. Some of the food that I had during the exam week was some oatmeal with some avocado, with some lean chicken breast, with some salad. Just eat a bunch of vegetables. Okay, I know how much that sucks. Maybe you like vegetables, maybe you don't, or how much you heard this, but it really helps in clearing your mind and getting that mental clarity. The other thing most people neglect is water drinking, and we talked about sleep. And then the other thing I want to talk about is exercise, okay? Do not neglect exercise. This is crucial, okay? During the IB exam week, I was lifting weights 6 times a week. So that was very important in maintaining, not only was that important in maintaining my energy, but it was also vital in maintaining my composure, meaning that the exam week was not different than any other week. My schedule was very similar. I would go to the gym every single day, so my body was getting used to that. I would sleep the same amount, I would eat the same amount, I would drink the same amount, I would hang out with family and friends, maybe a little bit less, but somewhat similar. Long story short, it did not get me out of that rhythm that my body was used to. The biggest mistake most people run into is that they just simply pull their body out of their natural rhythm, right? They introduce this crash diet, they introduce this lack of sleep, this lack of exercise, and this is where all the fevers happen. This is where all the stress ends up happening. Now, here's a very big strategy for after the IB exams. The IB exams can be stressful, okay? Absolutely no doubt. Now, what ends up happening, and this is why a lot of students get sick right after the exam, is that they're working so hard, they're putting all this stress, and then after the exam, they completely pull off the brakes. They do absolutely nothing. And what's actually very interesting about this is that it leaves your immune system vulnerable. So this is actually taken by Andrew Huberman, this strategy. Once you're done with the exam, maintain some level of activity. So one of the things I did after an exam is I take a lot of cold showers, and then I go to the ocean and I take cold baths, and then I do something to stimulate, I do some exercise, something to stimulate my immune system. That way I don't crash and I get a fever and then burnout. All right. And burnout, I think, is a very big thing that happens after exams. And one of the reasons why people feel so exhausted is because they just have this huge crash in their dopamine receptors, essentially. And one of the easiest ways to remove that crash, and basically the reason why I never get, I haven't gotten burned out since I took the IB. Okay. And even during the IB, I wasn't burned out. It was at the beginning of the IB where I just didn't really know what I was doing and I was doing the wrong stuff that I got burned out. And it was this one change right here that really changed my life. Right. And it's to avoid listening to music while you do work. All right. I know it sounds difficult. I know it sounds counterintuitive. Like, hey, I need music to work. With the exception of doing past paper questions where you can just kind of factory those and you just want to do as many as you humanly can, I would avoid listening to music. And the reason why is because, and again, Andrew Huberman talks about this, but when you layer too many different layers of dopamine, it leads to this overwhelming amount of dopamine released in your system, which eventually leads to a crash. And you might not experience the crash that week, but eventually it's going to build up. And then when you're done the IB exams, you're dead in the water. And then the number 8 crap thing that happens during the IB diploma is that people forget the reason why they're doing this. All right. The reason why you're doing the IB diploma, sure, it's to get into a top university, sure, it's to get good marks, sure, it's to actually maybe hopefully learn something. I don't know. Some people don't really care about that. But the biggest reason why you're doing the IB diploma, and this is once I started looking at not only the IB diploma, but all the other work I do from this angle became so incredibly easy. The reason why you're going through all the struggle, the reason why you're going through this exam week, the reason why you're going through these grade A's and all this work and just this stress and all this rest of it is to become a better version of yourself. All right. If I was to ask you, what does your ideal self look like, right? What would your best version of yourself look like? How would you look? How would you act? How would you walk? What would you be doing if you were to live your best life? Once you have that pictured, ask yourself, what type of person do I need to become to live that ideal lifestyle? And typically 9 times out of 10, in fact, 99 times out of 10, when I work with students who do this, that ideal version of themselves is typically a very successful individual. And in order for them to become that very successful individual, they need to have discipline, they need to have grit, they need to have that determination, ambition, all of these key character traits to become that person. So understand that the work you're doing right now is building those exact character traits. Let's just hypothetically say that the IB does not matter and all coursework you do in the 2 years, all the IAs, all that EE you wrote that was kind of painful. Imagine all that was burned and eliminated from history and it never happened to begin with. Well, it doesn't really matter because you still went through the progress and the process of doing that. And because of that, you built progress towards that belief system, that set of character traits, that ideal individual, right? It built you up. And because of that, I think this is just something I've been reflecting on a lot. I mean, it doesn't really matter the work. I mean, the actual results itself absolutely do matter, but even if they were eliminated, the work you did itself eliminated because you built those character traits in yourself, right? One of the biggest reasons why we're going through all this work, one of the biggest reasons why we're doing all of this is to become stronger individuals, is to become stronger people, right? We do this to build a stronger character, to build those fundamental skills that we need to ultimately become that high achieving student and then ultimately achieve our potential outside of the IB. So understand that all this struggle, and this is really the mindset shift that changed it for me. Instead of looking at the struggle as something annoying, instead of looking at it as this difficult thing, instead of looking at it as a waste of time, view it as an opportunity to become a better human. View it as an opportunity for you to move closer towards becoming that ideal version of yourself. Because even if none of the work you do matters, you still made progress towards bettering yourself. All right, so I'm going to leave you with that in this video. I hope you found it helpful. Again, if you want to check out that Easter egg, you can type in Grizzly Recall, all one word, with a capital G and capital R, Grizzly Recall into grizzly.com/Easter egg. You can get your resource there. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions at all, please leave them in the comment section down below or shoot me an Instagram DM at Joaquin_Velo. I do my best to respond to as many of those as I possibly can. And until next time, all right, stay grizzly. We'll talk in the next video. Goodbye.